Welcome to the Exploring Neurodiversity podcast for adults who support neurodivergent children. Whether you're an allied health professional, medical professional, education professional, or a parent of a neurodivergent child, you are welcome here. This podcast is recorded on the Aboriginal lands of the Gadigal and Bidjigal people. I acknowledge the traditional owners, elders past and present, and I extend my acknowledgement to any Aboriginal and First Nations people listening in. I'm Adina from Play, Learn, Chat. I'm an autistic ADHD speech therapist, professional educator, speaker, and I also support neurodivergent business owners in my other business, Neurodivergent Business Coaching and Consulting. I'm obsessed with creating a world where neurodivergent people are understood, embraced, supported, and celebrated. A world where we neurodivergent people can understand ourselves and thrive in a life aligned with our individual strengths, wants, and needs. On the Exploring Neurodiversity podcast, you'll get my perspectives and conversations with my neurodivergent friends, all about how adults can best support neurodivergent children in our lives. I bring a neurodiversity affirming approach and indeed a human affirming approach to the support that we all provide for neurodivergent kids in our lives. Let's dive in.
One really big important shift with neurodiversity affirming practice compared to, let's say, traditional therapies is this understanding that we don't need to or want to have eye contact as a goal for autistic people. It's something I talk about often, and so many other people do as well. And rather than just kind of nod and accept, yes, okay, let's not do eye contact as a goal, it's also really, really important to understand why that is. Why have we stopped, hopefully, forcing, prompting, and making eye contact a thing that children or anyone, any autistic person, needs to aim towards or focus on? So I did a little bit of research. I am bringing you the results of a survey that I recently did, opening up to my community and to anyone who they shared it with, where I've asked for autistic people's perspectives and experiences of eye contact. My hope and aim is to bring you diverse perspectives so that you can understand a range of stories, experiences, and how autistic individuals experience eye contact in their lives. I received almost 40 responses with amazing detail, depth, understanding, so many surprises in there for me. While I did get, I believe, quite a diverse range of perspectives, it's maybe not diverse enough. And what I mean by that is this survey went out to pretty much my audience, whether that was Instagram, people who receive my emails, Facebook, and so on. In my audience, I have quite a lot of health professionals. Some are autistic, many are late diagnosed. There are quite a lot of females in my audience. There are quite a lot of Australians in my audience. So I do expect that the sample that you've got here is not exactly representative of all autistic people. It's representative of some of the autistic people in my community who knew about my questionnaire. That said, I'm really happy to see there's a few responses from teenagers. I've got some responses from people of all different ages across the world, but I think I would love to hear even more diverse perspectives, including, from more people who are not female late diagnosed professionals like myself. What I'm saying is, if that is you, you're very welcome to contribute your perspective as well. And if that is not you and you are autistic or you support an autistic person, I would love to hear further, more diverse autistic perspectives about eye contact. And I will continue to share these over time. All perspectives are valid. And I'd be especially interested to hear perspectives of non-white folks, non-speaking folks, autistic folks with intellectual disability, and folks with other co-occurring disabilities. So please do keep sharing this questionnaire and the resource, and I hope over time we can continue to get an even deeper body of diverse perspectives to keep sharing with the world. Now there's two ways that I'm presenting this. The full responses, exactly as everybody shared with me, is on my blog, and you'll find it on my website, playlearnchat.com/eye-contact. That's EYE, as in the eyes on your face. So that is a resource that you are so welcome to share with other people in your world, your boss, parents that you work with your partner, or, whoever it is that you feel needs a bit more background to understand why eye contact is unnecessary and perhaps even harmful for autistic people. If you were one of these people who contributed to the survey, I really, really appreciate your time, your effort, the spoons that you spent responding and sharing your perspectives. I invited people to anonymize themselves if they wanted to, or share any part of who they are, either their name, an initial, a nickname, how old they are, where they are, if they wanted to share their Instagram handle. So each person has been attributed to their comment in the way that they chose. Now, I would like to keep this open in future. So while this is my big first presentation of these insights and perspectives, if you didn't get a chance to respond and you're an autistic person, or if you support an autistic person that you think would be interested in contributing their perspective to this data set, you'll find the form on that website, playlearnchat.com/i-contact. And I will continue to take responses in. I'm not sure at what point in the future I will update this data set, but I will revisit this. Maybe it will be in a podcast episode, or maybe it will be adding to the voices on the website. For this podcast episode, I'm not able to read out everybody's comments, so I really would encourage you to go and visit my website to see all of the comments that people left. What I've done with this data is to analyze it for themes. So I ended up coming out with 7 key themes that were talked about across all the comments. And then as I picked the key points for each person's comment that I'm going to share with you, I figured out which theme was kind of most prevalent in that comment. Many of the comments spanned many different themes, and you'll hear that. Let me first share with you the themes that I came up with. And then I will go into some of the highlights, or I don't want to call them highlights. The whole thing was a highlight. It was all very, very interesting and, to make a possible pun, eye-opening. So the 8 themes were talking about discomfort and pain, sensory experiences, emotional impacts of eye contact, masking, coping and compensation strategies, the impact of relationships, meaning someone having a different experience of eye contact depending on who they were having the eye contact with, and experiences of therapy and training. Kicking off with the theme of discomfort and pain. Our first comment is from Steph, age 35, from Victoria, Australia. She is at SGR Occupational Therapy on Instagram. She said, I always found the contact really uncomfortable unless the person was someone very intimate to me. My parents, daughter, husband seem to be okay to have fleeting eye contact, but other people I'm not comfortable with feels so painful if I force it. I don't anymore. Now I explain openly to people that I'm listening to them and that I'm able to attend to them better when I'm looking elsewhere, drawing, doodling, fiddling, etc. Kate, 33, from Sydney, Australia. She's at Kate, Kait, .tattoo on Instagram. She says, eye contact can feel painful and incredibly frustrating. I can be scrolling on my phone as a stim or engaging in my special interest while someone talks to me and they tell me to look at them, which makes me just feel angry inside, and in my mind I'm waiting for it to just be over with. It can feel intrusive and aggressive, almost like a slap in the face. When I'm totally relaxed, like with my kids, I'll look them in the eye with so much joy, and it can feel overwhelming and make me cry. SH, aged in their 50s in the UK, says, I don't mind brief eye contact, but really feel uncomfortable if someone is looking at me for more than, say, 10 seconds max. I will make eye contact for a few seconds max and then have to look away. I feel really under the spotlight and generally like they are staring into my soul. And this is really interesting. The soul theme, people staring into your soul, has come up in quite a few of the comments. It was really interesting to me. Jess, 22, from Kent in the UK. She is at Elephant Mouse, MOUS, number 3, on Instagram. Jess says, eye contact makes me feel very exposed, uncomfortable. It feels like someone is staring into my soul and judging me for everything I am. It's too intense. The experience is horrible. I don't feel physical pain, but emotional pain. I taught myself to look at people's noses to avoid that intense, uncomfortable feeling, but when I look away from people, the relief is so real, my whole body relaxes. Nicole, 33, from Perth, Australia, says, eye contact has always been a hard experience for me. It makes me feel super uncomfortable, and I find I've always had to force myself to do it and to remind myself to look away sometimes and then back. I find if I'm comfortable with someone, it's a lot easier, but I do feel more comfortable when talking to someone and not maintaining eye contact. Rachel Hazelwood, 54, from Cardiff in Wales, says, I was born in 1970 and was trained/forced to endure eye contact. I hate it. It makes me feel so exposed and vulnerable and is actually painful. I can tolerate it for short bursts but have sneaky ways to give myself respite, such as looking at the bridge of a person's nose or taking long, slow blinks. I would love to live in a world where eye contact wasn't expected. I love hanging out with other autistic people because we just talk and understand each other's different use of facial expressions, body language, and gestures. I absolutely love that vision of the future, and my hope is that this can be part of that body of work that goes to support the whole world's understanding that eye contact can be an optional experience and not a necessity for communication. Imogen H, age 30, from Canberra, Australia, says, eye contact makes me feel pain. It feels like itchy eyeballs, held breath, tight chest, and an intense concentration on an aspect of an interaction that adds nothing to the intention. From a cultural perspective, I think forced eye contact is rude. What other form of social communication would be tolerated as polite if it caused harm? Forced eye contact makes me feel like someone is trying to dominate me. It feels like a power play, even in well-intentioned people. It impacts my communication because I end up running all sorts of contingency plans in my head, trying to spot what the person actually wants from me instead of being able to use my words and other forms of communication to understand perspectives. Vicky, 39, from Chichester, UK, and I hope I said that right. Vicky says, I find eye contact hard and uncomfortable in a lot of situations, but most often in personal one-to-one situations. I also find it hard to think and make eye contact at the same time, so I tend to look up or away when I'm thinking or talking about something. I make an effort to make eye contact at work when engaging with colleagues or clients, but I have to think about it, as in when to look, how long to look for, and when to look away. Sarah, 45, in Geelong, Australia, says, eye contact feels excruciating for me. Most interactions with neurotypicals require me to maintain eye contact at the expense of my mental energy and impacts my ability to regulate myself. The longer I'm required to maintain eye contact, the more recovery time I will need afterwards. That is deeply important. Many of the experiences that people shared, and my own as well, are that we can do eye contact, but there is a cost, there's an expense. And it's not at the expense of the neurotypical person, it's at the expense of the autistic individual. That energetic cost, that mental health toll can be really hidden, and we need to talk about it. We need to address it. We need to understand it. On our next theme of sensory experiences, here's what some people shared. KH, aged 48, from Melbourne, Australia, said, I lip read not because I'm deaf, but because it helps me process auditory stimuli. I know that I'm supposed to regularly look in people's eyes, so I remember to look up regularly. No one taught me this. I just do it. AM, aged 38, from Australia, says, I struggle to hear and know what the other person is saying when I focus on good eye contact. I will say there were quite a lot of comments that were similar to that in a lot of other people's contributions as well. Anonymous, age 63, from Queensland, Australia, says, I'm hearing impaired also, so I look like I'm giving eye contact, but I'm actually reading lips. Eye contact is welcome and okay for me when I feel understood. If not, I am not giving that much of me to accommodate the other person. I think what's interesting is you'll hear a theme across some of the comments as well of people taking control, autistic folks getting more conscious about the impact of eye contact on themselves and self-advocating, making choices about how they do eye contact or how they tell other people about what eye contact is for them or how they will or won't use it, which is very important. But at the same time, if there wasn't an issue to start with, we wouldn't have to self-advocate. But, there's always case for self-advocacy. So that's interesting to hear these perspectives too. Michael, aged 49, from the Gold Coast, he's at The Deep Dive AU on Instagram, and he's got a podcast, The Deep Dive, which is very much worth a listen. He's excellent on the microphone, and so Michael submitted a video response, so I'm going to play it for you, and you can hear Michael's perspective around eye contact.
Okay, well, how does my eye contact affect me? Well, I may look a bit weird with eye contact, looking in different directions, looking at when I'm trying to think about things and trying to put together thoughts into words. I may look down to the ground sometimes when I'm trying to socialize, or my neck may look in a funny position when I talk. If it is a subject I'm really engaged about, I try and look around the face area, but sometimes I cannot tell when they're bored or not. So that's how I show eye contact.
Another person shared, when I make direct eye contact with someone, it feels like I'm seeing everything about them all at once. All their minute facial expressions, what they are thinking and feeling, and turning it into a hyper-empathic way. It's a lot to process, especially if I'm trying to focus on what we are both saying. I'm a late self-identified clinician, and it blew my mind to realize that not everyone is constantly aware of what they are doing with their eye contact, in the same way that I've always been. On the theme of emotional impacts of eye contact, Debbie from Australia shared, I've often wondered whether lack of eye contact has been the reason why sometimes I was never considered for jobs, but there was never any feedback, so I can't be sure. I'm often aware of my lack of eye contact in social situations, and I think it gets worse in some situations than others. I've often wondered whether it's related to how regulated my nervous system is, my emotional state/relational safety. I've often felt very self-conscious about it. AK, aged 57, from Queensland, Australia, has shared, in response to my question of how does eye contact make you feel in different situations? In casual, happy contexts, eye contact is fine and part of sensory exploration. In contexts of criticism, review, psychological pressure, eye contact presses trauma buttons to flee, freeze, or bite back. Continued trauma pressure such as bullying leads to psychosocial safety collapse, dopamine loss, and potential incapacity to talk, operate, etc. i.e. a deep trauma outcome. Another person shared, making eye contact, especially in emotionally intense interactions, feels like everything sensitive and private about myself is written on my eyeballs, and the longer I make eye contact, the more secrets they can steal from me. Despite this, I mostly always make eye contact because I feel a sense of safety in masking, but noticeably different feels unsafe. So either way, I'm feeling unsafe in an interaction. It's a trap. Tash shared, lack of eye contact does not bother me, it bothers other people. My mum used to feel really offended when I didn't give her eye contact. Another person shared, after a number of comments saying I have an intense gaze, it has made me paranoid about where to look and how much to make. Eye contact itself, though, is not my issue. It's what goes along with it when you aren't doing it in a neurotypical way. On the topic of masking, Ash, aged 38 from Australia, shared, being taught as a child that it's necessary or polite means that I will often try to make eye contact with people despite it feeling deeply uncomfortable for me. When I have to focus on making the appropriate level of eye contact, not too intense, not too little, or they'll think you're shifty, I find it much harder to use my words and communicate effectively. Jessica O, aged 30 from Lake Macquarie, Australia. She's at Aussie Autism Family on Instagram. She shares, I always thought I was okay with eye contact until I realised I've been masking all these years and would put strategies in place to use eye contact in a neurotypical way. I'm always thinking about how much eye contact I give. When someone is talking to me, I will look into their eyes. Then after a while, I will realise that I'm actually staring at them for too long. I do this to better understand what they're saying. I prefer sitting side by side to people whilst talking. This allows me to look at what's going on in front of me while talking and not have to stare right into someone's eyes. SB, aged 53 from the UK, shared, my autism assessment said that I made normal, in inverted commas, eye contact. But I think that I've spent years learning how to do it. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 52. When I start to think about it, I get confused and uncomfortable and have to break eye contact. I was told when I was younger that I stared at people, but not in the eyes. JP, aged 26 from Sydney, Australia, said, eye contact is interesting. I recently learned that the way I show eye contact is a form of masking. I feel really comfortable providing eye contact when I start my sentences, and then as I'm finishing the sentence, if I have a lot to say, I'll often look to the side or down at the materials that I'm referring to. As a speech pathologist, it was taught that eye contact is important for communication, but I realised that it was stressful for me and my client to try and force it. Once I leaned into not forcing it, I realised that social interactions are much smoother. Nathaniel, aged 18, turning 19, from Maleny in Queensland, Australia, says, I usually try to make eye contact, especially in formal circumstances, because it was what I was taught in therapy as a teen before I was diagnosed. If I feel like I'm masking well, eye contact isn't as bad, but masking can be really hard. In interpersonal conversation, I sometimes use eye contact and sometimes don't. But I always feel really guilty when I don't use it because I feel rude for ignoring someone and not meeting their eyes. It's a lot better when I'm with other autistic people, but I still feel a little guilt. I do make more eye contact with people who I'm romantically interested in because I think being vulnerable is part of romantic affection. And thus making eye contact is me removing the barrier of all the anxiety and just letting myself be. Plus, sometimes people's eyes are really pretty. I actually love all of that. There's so many great insights, but this idea is something I relate to as well. Sometimes the sensory experience of looking into someone's eyes to actually look at the eye itself is really fascinating. And I can get very absorbed in looking at the colours and the details in somebody's eyeball without actually following the conversation. SMS from Queensland, Australia, aged 41, shared, forcing myself to meet the other person's eyes along with other appropriate, in inverted commas, signs of attention is distracting for me and often means I miss what they're saying. I can't keep my train of thought when I'm focused on maintaining eye contact. Sarah, aged 27 from Brisbane, Australia, shared, if I'm having a general conversation with someone where I feel I have to mask to neurotypical norms, I will try my best to give as much eye contact as possible without staring into their soul. Half my mind is focused on whether I'm blinking too much or if I should look away for a moment to make sure I'm not making them uncomfortable with too much eye contact. It also impacts my ability to retrieve words, provide well-structured sentences, and retrieve memories accurately. I also find it extremely hard to describe something I'm talking about if I can't look up and away to a blank space, for example, a roof, wall, or the sky, to try to visualize what I'm thinking about. As a child, I used to get a lot of prompts to focus on people when they were talking, with my family lovingly referring to my inattentive moments as "oh butterfly" moments. And correctly so. Sometimes me looking away was an unintentional distraction of thoughts and disengagement with the conversation. However, sometimes looking away would help me visualize or process what others were telling me. So it was difficult as a child to not get upset when I was listening, but teachers or family members would assume that I wasn't because I had looked away. On the topic of coping and compensation strategies, now you've already heard quite a few peppered throughout the other comments, and here I'll share a few more that specifically talk about these strategies. Kate M. from Sydney, Australia shared, "The way I experience it is that it is mainly distracting from the conversation and I have a lot of thoughts about eye contact. The analogy I use at work is like if someone had a little flashlight next to their eyes and expected you to make eye contact with them, you'd blink a lot, want to look away and think, wow, that light is so bright. And wow, can it just not? And also get a small headache and not pay much attention to the actual conversation. That's exactly what it's like. I tried using my phone torch to show someone this exact thing once, but they didn't like it. Maybe that's because it was uncomfortable. Maybe that's the point. I'm not sure yet if it's a good teaching tool." Kate, I think that is fascinating. What an interesting idea to actually turn your experience into something quite tangible that you might be able to show somebody, that somebody else might end up perceiving as a version of your experience. Cool experiment. Thank you for sharing that. Anyway, Kate goes on. "Now that I know all this, I'd stop going to restaurants or cafes where you sit right across from the other person. I really dislike that, so usually I'll go for a walk with friends or husband, etc. if we want to catch up, talk with a third object that we both look at, sit in a corner booth at a cafe, and always try to be 90 degrees, etc. It doesn't come up that much as a distressing thing, but I've tailored my life around having comfy interactions." Kim, age 31, from Australia, she is at Creativity and Beyond OT on Instagram. Kim has shared, "I regularly avoid eye contact in regular situations, i.e. supermarket cashiers, and will make the perceived wrong eye contact with friends. For example, they had braces and I'd always be looking at them and not their face. I regularly look away to speak and stare in multiple directions as it helps keep my focus." SP, aged 30 plus, in Melbourne, Australia, shares, "As a healthcare worker, I'm aware that some patients and family members prefer eye contact to show that I care and am paying attention. I use tricks to look at the sides of their eyes or the middle of their eyes. People with eye makeup is easy as I look at their eyebrows, lids, and lashes. I think because I'm in this situation, I am the professional in the power dynamic, it's a lot easier to do, and I can make eye contact as part of my routine spiel to build rapport and connection. Sometimes though, if I need to concentrate on the situation, eye contact is too hard to manage. Eye contact is exhausting and uses a lot of focus. It feels uncomfortable, like I'm staring at something I shouldn't see. It's the same feeling/reaction that you get when you first glance at a disabled person or someone different to your race. And in brackets, as a disabled brown person, I know the feeling well, and know to look away quickly." Hannah, age 33, from Sydney, Australia. She is at Hanastasia X on Instagram. "I tend to enjoy one-on-one walks in nature with people, so I'm walking parallel with them, which means no or very little eye contact, while also regulating on a walk and connecting with nature. I'll often have a little voice in my head stating, have I been holding eye contact too long? Wait, I need to make eye contact." I definitely relate to that overthinking. How much is the correct amount of eye contact? How is it supposed to look? An anonymous commenter from the USA shared, "Growing up, I was forced to make eye contact due to the social norm. As an adult, I've chosen not to. While it might be awkward for the other person at first, getting accustomed to the lack of eye contact, it's freeing for me. It helps strengthen the relationship because I can be authentic and open up more. Plus, I can focus on what they're saying better, and it reduces the likelihood of being overstimulated." On the impact of relationships, Winston, aged 16, from Sydney, Australia, at Winston Junior Dezilva, Dezilva, on Instagram. Winston shares, "I, as a matter of fact, actually love making eye contact with people I really trust or want to be intimate with. It's a similar rule to touch. I'm not really a touchy person except with close friends and people I trust. I don't force it, but I don't mind or want it." Sam, age 32, from Virginia in the USA. "In my work with autistic kids, I found that some will have moments of holding very intense eye contact with me while being pretty close to my face. Often these seem to be my kids with limited spoken communication, and in those moments there is an incredible sense of trust and like a whole conversation is had." ES, aged 14, from the USA, shares, "For me, eye contact is an intimate action. I do like to make eye contact with a few people in my life that I'm really close to, but it's uncomfortable to make eye contact with strangers, acquaintances, most people I interact with on a daily basis." Mel, age 34, from Melbourne, Australia. She is at neurodivergent.reflections on Instagram. Mel shares, "The only person I'm more comfortable with more extended eye contact with is my husband, probably due to those feelings around intensity and intimacy. Even then, it can feel like a lot. I've got to have the energy for it, which feels kind of funny, to be honest. needing energy to do something that so many people take for granted. And our final theme is experiences of therapy and training. Anna, age 34 from Australia, shared this incredible reflection, a story from childhood. One time when I was a child, a teacher wanted to explain to me how to do a task and came over to talk to me. She got offended I was ignoring her because I was avoiding eye contact and forced me to hold eye contact with her while she was speaking. I felt humiliated, overwhelmed, and terrified. And to this day, currently I'm in my 30s, I remember how bad it was and how awful I felt and wonder, what did she possibly get from forcing an 8-year-old girl to look her in the eye? What sort of adult has such a fragile sense of self-respect that it can be threatened by an 8-year-old's lack of eye contact? I still feel confused and hurt when I think about it because for me it was so intensely confronting and also so unnecessary. It feels so unfair that I get a traumatic memory for the rest of my life because she couldn't deal with 10 seconds without eye contact. That interaction is why I learnt to mask so I would never have to deal with that again. Kay shares, I've not had any therapy about this, but did attend an annoying social skills class at uni that was really designed to build more understanding of Australian social norms for international students. They made us make eye contact, which was annoying because I know how to do that, not because it's uncomfortable. I do notice that I really hate eye contact and avert my gaze when I'm distressed or dysregulated. Outside of moments of distress, I seek eye contact to make sure I can read my conversational partners and feel connected with them. It's a really important observation that eye contact norms are very, very different across cultures and across subcultures. So while Kay was asked to participate in a social skills class to fit in more with Australian social norms, I'm not sure who wrote the book on Australian social norms, it does make me wonder whether we, Australians, are on the higher end of expectations for eye contact. There are certainly cultures where eye contact is viewed in different ways, including being an important marker of power and respect, and there's so many different interpretations, so it's not a universal given. Anyway, I digress. Let's go on to our last comment. So Anonymous 63 from Australia shared, I was in my 30s in a class on small business management. One of the tasks was to sit opposite a person and speak to them on a subject whilst looking them in the eye. I couldn't do it. It was extremely uncomfortable and I started to cry. I don't think I realised to what extent I had avoided looking at people. There are so many more important, essential insights. So I really, really hope that you will go to check out the full array of comments that people left. And again, if there's something that you as an autistic person or an autistic person in your life would like to contribute on this topic, please head over to playlearnchat.com/I-contact and you can join in the conversation there. I hope that you will share this podcast episode and that blog post as resources to support other people in your life to understand just some of the differing perspectives and experiences that autistic folks have around eye contact.
Thank you so much for sharing this space and time with me. Thank you for being open to learning and unlearning and to listening to the perspectives and experiences of neurodivergent folks. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend, share a screenshot on Instagram, pop a 5-star rating and a review in your favourite app, and join me on Instagram and Facebook. I'm at play.learn.chat. Have a spectacular day.